This video is brought to you by Ting, mobile that makes sense.
Hey guys, Nick here for Rev3 Games, and recently I was lucky enough to get to play a little bit of Bloodborne, which is the next-gen Dark Souls spiritual successor from Software and Hidetaka Miyazaki. And right off the bat, I want to say that this is a game that I think will make fans of the Souls series very, very happy. So I got to spend time with two different weapon combinations in Bloodborne. The first one, and the one I spent the most time with, was a saw/blunderbuss combo. So what that is in one hand, the right hand, I have a saw that I could retract or lengthen by hitting L1 that sort of worked as a short sword, a very traditional like melee weapon in classic Souls style, but I could basically make it longer and give it a longer range and make it more damaging but make it a lot slower by pressing L1 at any time to lengthen it or shorten it. And then in the left hand I had a blunderbuss, which is basically an extremely slow firing shotgun that is only effective at extremely close range. The other weapon combo I got to use was the axe/pistol, the pistol being just a slightly longer range but still very slow firing handgun, and the axe being a one-handed weapon that, when I hit L1 to transform it, extended into a two-handed weapon, effectively putting the pistol away and requiring me to use both arms with it. And let me tell you that the heavy attack with the extended axe is one of the slowest, broadest, wall-hittingest moves I've ever used in a Souls game. So the controls will be super familiar to anyone who's used to Dark Souls. R2 is a heavy attack and R1 is a light attack. Where they kind of mix it up though is that you are almost always holding a gun in your left hand and you fire that by pressing L2. L1 is now committed entirely to switching or transforming, I guess, the style of your melee weapon. So like I mentioned, turning the saw into the long saw, turning the axe into the two-handed axe, etc. And the spokesperson I talked to said that virtually every melee weapon in the game has a transform that it can do with the L1 button. The rest of the buttons though are pretty standard Dark Souls fare. Triangle is your potions, square is your items, circle is dodge/sprint, and it basically just feels a lot like what you've come to expect from the Souls series. I didn't really, I remember trying to get used to what happened, and the first time I encountered an enemy, I immediately tapped circle and rolled backwards away and was like, okay, alright, this is definitely what I expected it to be. This feels like a Souls title to me. So while Bloodborne is technically Dark Souls with guns, it's not exactly what you think of when you hear that. I remember when I first heard of the premise of this game being a Miyazaki game, but with guns at it, I was like, how is that going to work? How is that not going to break the balance? Ranged combat isn't exactly the strongest part of these Souls games to me, so how's that going to work? And I'm excited to report that it doesn't actually fundamentally change what you love about Souls combat. The guns don't break the balance of the game at all. Ammo is extremely limited. I think I had like maybe 5 shots in my shotgun when I spawned, and I very rarely found more. And the guns actually don't do a tremendous amount of damage. I guess I'd say 95% of the attacking I did was melee based, if that gives you a sense of how traditional of a Souls game this feels like. So obviously, since they don't do a ton of damage and you have very limited ammo, guns are not your primary method of attack in Bloodborne, but they do factor into combat in a very different, very interesting way that feels very much aligned with Miyazaki-san's past games. If you fire your weapon at an enemy at up close range right before one of their attacks would hit you, they sort of just flinch for like barely a half second, and it works on pretty much every enemy you encounter. And by quickly getting off a light attack by hitting R1 during this half-second long flinch window, it triggers this special shot counter attack that basically takes your melee weapon, stabs it through the enemy, like all the way through them, and pulls it out, which deals a tremendous amount of damage. And it's kind of cool because it gives you a counter system that you can use at any time. I mean, the main difference in my short time playing it between the guns in this new game and the weapons you're used to from Dark Souls is that they fire very quickly. They're not super high damage, and the range isn't necessarily amazing on all of them, but the main benefit of them is that when you're panicking, when an enemy's hitting you and you can't get out of the way in time, you can just tap L1, fire off around at them, make them flinch, and then get a quick counterattack off. And it's kind of cool to have that extra option in your arsenal in Dark Souls combat. But yeah, they're a very, very short-range weapon, which is not exactly what I expected. At least the guns that I used were. So let's talk about the melee combat. Again, it feels a lot like Dark Souls. In the case of the saw that I spent most of my time with, it was kind of cool to be able to transform it from a short sword to a long sword. Again, just like the guns, it kind of adds one more layer of complexity and depth and variety on top of the standard light attack versus heavy attack stuff that you're used to from a Souls game. The other big change to the combat is that dodging feels quite a bit faster and maybe just like it responds quicker than in past Souls games. I was able to get out of harm's way a lot more easily and consistently than in the previous titles in the series, and there were plenty of those sort of classic slow-swinging Dark Souls-esque enemies in there. Although, interestingly, all the enemies in this game spoke English and have British accents, which is it's kind of a weird thing when you're used to the Dark Souls universe to have these sort of very British, sort of mid-century enemies to fight. I also fought against some of the iconic dogs that you might have recognized from that very first Bloodborne teaser, which were very, very fast, but also very, very weak, although I can't really say how much of that accounts for the difficulty of this demo. Another factor to take into consideration when talking about the difficulty of this demo is that I was given a lot of potions. I spawned with a couple and was just finding them everywhere. So many enemies dropped them. So they kind of said that this demo was maybe adjusted for difficulty. Although I did take down a mid-boss without getting hit a single time, and even though this was maybe an easier demo of Bloodborne, I'm still a little proud of that, so I had to at least mention that. So obviously the other side of Bloodborne being a game with guns in it is that many of the enemies have guns, and fighting armed enemies is actually pretty interesting. Like, yeah, they have guns, but they're still very Dark Souls-y like enemies. They're very animation heavy with like sort of slow-moving guys with super obvious tells that can kind of indicate when they're about to shoot if you're looking at them. All the armed enemies I fought in this demo had rifles and therefore were firing very slowly, like maybe every 7 to 8 seconds at the fastest, but you do need to stay super aware of them because unlike traditional enemies, they can kind of fuck you up at a distance. So think of them as like maybe the spell casting enemies that you would encounter in the original Dark Souls, but firing slightly faster and with much faster moving projectiles. There was a lot of timing my dodges around when I thought they were going to fire and kind of kiting them around walls and trying to eliminate them first, because compared to like a slower, more melee-focused enemy, they can kind of hit you from anywhere, obviously. But basically the combat is what you'd expect from one of Miyazaki-san's games. Lots of dodging and opportunistic swinging in on enemies when they're weak. Graphically, I guess I'd say that it's a prettier game in this series, obviously one of the prettiest ones in the series. Not really mind-blowing from what I saw. Very, very jaggy. It seemed like there wasn't any anti-aliasing on what I saw, and there was some significant slowdown, which kind of gave me some heart-rending flashbacks to the original Xbox 360 version of Dark Souls. But obviously, you know, early build, early demo, the game's not done. Maybe this is stuff that'll be worked out later, but something I thought that was maybe worth mentioning. Overall, Bloodborne feels very, very, very much like an entry in the Souls series, but maybe a slightly faster one, and one that might be a bit more responsive, and maybe even a bit closer to what you see in traditional action games compared to some of Miyazaki-san's past work. Still, though, again, the difference is very, very slight, something I think only Dark Souls diehards would pick up on, and only seems to serve to deepen the combat, not dumb it down. They haven't made it way easier by letting you dodge faster or use guns or anything. All that stuff just adds layers of complexity without making the game too easy, which I think has made, like, settle a lot of my concerns about what this game is. It seems like a very uncompromised vision of what a next-gen Souls game in a new setting would be, and I think it's going to make a lot of the diehard Dark Souls and Souls series fans out there extremely happy. In the meantime, though, if you have any questions about my time with Bloodborne, I will be hanging out in the YouTube comments right below, so any questions that you guys have about the game, just like drop them in there. I'll answer them for you to the best of my ability. There's a couple things about Bloodborne that I didn't have time to mention here because we don't have a ton of footage of it. But yeah, ask anything and I'll do my best to answer it. In the meantime, thank you for watching.
If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting us by checking out Ting. Ting is a mobile cell phone service provider that would save money for 98% of Americans. That's a 9, then an 8. Some folks would save as much as hundreds of dollars a year by switching to Ting. With Ting, you only ever pay for what you use, so if you're like me and never use the phone part of your cell phone, your phone bill that month will be $0. Ting is also completely contract-free, which means no early termination fees, and they'll even help you pay your network's fees so you can make the switch over. Support Rev3 Games by heading to rev3games.ting.com and you'll get $25 and free credit off your first bill.
Ubisoft Toronto, and you guys are sort of focusing on the Shangri-La part of the game.
Yeah, I'm specifically the narrative designer on Shangri-La.
Okay. So can you explain for everybody how this sort of fits into the overall game?
Well, I think the idea with Far Cry 4 was to create almost huge, massive sort of experience.